Greetings, stranger. Thank you for waiting for me. I promise you it will be worth it. This evening I would like to tell you about one of Andoran's 4 major regions. It is called Arthfell, and it encompasses everything you can see on the port side of the ship, west of the River Andoshen all the way to the Chalaxian border. The tour is meandering towards Highhelm, and so we will only see the region called Darkmoon Vale in person, but that does not mean you cannot learn about Andoran's oldest province from here. Besides, the most interesting parts of the region are actually quite dangerous to wander around unarmed, and I do not wish to see you cursed with lycanthropy or sacrificed to the ghosts of cannibals. Did that pique your interest? Then come join me once more and listen to me exposit on Arthfell, the economic heart of Andoran. Whenever a historian decides to investigate the earliest days of Andoran, they inevitably find themselves wandering Arthfell. Remember that for many thousands of years, this land was governed by more powerful masters, first Taldor, then Cheliax, and thus for the longest time, Andoran was merely a province on local maps. It was the Taldan general Castalus of Corentin who formally incorporated the then heavily forested area for the Empire in the year 1707, although Taldor's 4th Army of Exploration had in fact mapped, that is, conquered, what would become known as Arthfell some decades prior in 1683. General Castalus simply solidified the Empire's control by founding the port city of Augustana, which still stands today as Andoran's 2nd largest city, regional capital, and formidable naval shipyard. The Empire of Taldor was interested in the region for its abundance of timber. The mighty Arthfell forest, which today finds shelter in the western shadow of the Arthfell Mountains and Nogortha Peaks, at the time stretched across the whole of what would become western Andoran, from the Five Kings Range to the Inner Sea. It did not take long for this abundance to dwindle once the newcomers' axes got to work, though, and soon the forest was reduced to its core. Naturally, the local Kelid tribes and their druids, already dealing with colonization from the east, were infuriated by this wanton mismanagement of the land, a rage shared by the Fey peoples of Arthfell, whose very homes were being eradicated. They turned to violence, and considerably slowed the felling of the Arthfell's trees for some time. After many decades of bloody conflict, an uneasy truce of sorts eventually emerged between the Andorans and the Fey, the Kelid peoples having unfortunately been largely integrated or expelled from the land by this point. The inhabitants of the forest ceased their punitive raids beyond the tree lines, and in exchange, the lumberjacks endeavored to manage what remained of the woodland sustainably. This agreement was mostly honored, though naturally there were always factions within factions scheming to change the status quo. But by 4438, the Arthfell forest had been united under the stewardship of a powerful druid by the name of Narvan Feathereyes, whose sage diplomacy protected its inhabitants from an increasingly boisterous lumber consortium. His sudden death in 4508, despite being over 200 years ago now, caused such sharp divisions within the Arthfell factions that they still more or less define the inhabitants of the forest today. While the eponymous forest is without question the most important landmark in the Arthfell region of Andoran, we should first discuss Augustana, because to a foreigner and to the world at large, the port city is much more prominent. Being the oldest Taldan settlement in Andoran, its population has had plenty of time to grow, and today it houses over 55,000 people. Lumber is, of course, the lifeblood of the port, and also sustains its role as one of the Inner Sea's premier shipyards. Augustana shipwrights rival even mighty Absalom's in the design and construction of seaworthy vessels of all kinds, though most rightly associate the city with its warships. Indeed, the Andoran Navy is headquartered here, and it is a sight to behold. Hundreds upon hundreds of vessels, great and small, bearing the Andoran colours, are packed along every pier, overlooking oily waters and wide wharves, all illuminated after sunset by the constant glow of the forges that maintain them. The Eagle Knights might be more beloved in the hearts of the Andoran people, but to most foreigners, it is the state navy that holds the country's true power. The The city is also well known for its 2 harbours. The relatively minor river Arthfell drains into a brackish basin before reaching the sea, and this reservoir is connected to the true harbour only by a narrow choke point. Consequently, the basin is referred to as the fresh harbour, which is suitable for small vessels and riverboats, while the inner seas waves are called the Great Salt Harbour. 2 bridges called the Fleet and the Market allow pedestrians across the river whilst keeping their clothes dry, and simultaneously prevent larger ships from passing into the fresh harbour, which is actually deep enough to accommodate them. Augustana itself straddles both sides of the river, defined by a strong wall regularly reinforced by watchtowers. Unlike Absalom's enormous West Gate, or the proud Iron Gate or God's Gate of Almas, there is no obvious land route into the city. Some of the watchtowers do accommodate a small degree of foot traffic, but the primary entrance is by sea, and the secondary entrance by river. Only very rugged locals choose to enter Augustana on foot, and even then, often just for the novelty of it. Once inside the city, the budding tourist has no fewer than 7 districts to choose from. In general, the closer you are to the water, the wealthier the districts become, quite the reverse of Absalom. In the east you have Copperdown, a working-class district dominated by labourers and seasonal longshoremen who struggle to secure long-term employment. The alleyways there are narrow, dark and dangerous. The air hangs heavy with the smell of urine and liquor, and the only characters you are likely to meet by chance are racketeers coerced by local gangs into harassing passers-by. You really ought to avoid Copperdown if you can. In the middle of Augustana lies Fleet, the city's merchant district. It is built up as a confusing spiral across both sides of the river, having been established on and around the 2 bridges that connect North and South Augustana. This guarantees that you cannot get from one side to the other on foot without being hounded by peddlers. You'll find almost everything in the Fleet district if you look hard enough, though it will take some time to sift through the seemingly endless supply of wares relevant only to naval pursuits. Rigging, sails, timber products, cartography, munitions for cannons, eye patches, silly birds. All of these and more dominate Fleet. The southwest of the city is the Shipyard district, and there is not 1 inch of shoreline left unclaimed by its inhabitants and workers. When most people imagine Augustana, they imagine the Shipyard district. Seasoned and perhaps somewhat jaded travellers will tell you that if you have seen one docks district, you have seen them all, and that may be true for many cities, but I do not think it applies to Augustana's. Its warehouse doors seldom shut on account of how quickly goods hurtle through them, even in the depths of cold winter nights, and their workers warm themselves in the heat of the nearby forges to make it through those long, dark shifts. The shipyards are the biggest in the inner sea, no doubt about it. Even Absalom's docks district cannot match it, for while it may stretch for longer, it lacks the sheer density and focus of Augustana's. Protecting the harbour is Arsenal Island, home to an intimidating fortress garrisoned by the Andoran military. Any attack from the sea needs first to overcome its impressive array of cannons, and then the reinforcements that are easily summoned from Fort Constance, which lies only 300 yards north. 1,000 marines man the bastion, and they are a critical bulwark against any Chalaxian or pirate incursion into the harbour. It might not be as technically ingenious as Absalom's flotsam graveyard, but I think it will prove just as troublesome to any would-be invader. Overlooking these forts stands Admiralty Hill, which houses many a wealthy naval officer and retired sea captain. A purely residential district, enormous catapult-lined fortress notwithstanding, of course, Admiralty Hill represents the dream of luxury for many sailors, though even a modest house there is far beyond the means of most retirees. Another district called The Slopes lies just north of the hill in its shadow, and its more modest houses are perhaps achievable to your average merchant or seaman. However, because it is not visible from the harbours, most citizens barely acknowledge its existence, which has kept the slopes small and furtive, with a culture to match. More achievable may be the Arsenal district, whose piers and forges serve the many commercial vessels transporting goods and people into Augustana. While it is not as visually impressive as the Shipyard district, it is actually a lot wealthier on account of the many merchant ships that dock here and the temples that line its streets. Consequently, it is one of the best protected areas of the city. Finally, Augustana also has, just north of the Arsenal district, its Oldtown. As the name suggests, Oldtown is the oldest part of the city, and students of architecture the world over come to gawk at its wonders, including Andoran's oldest bank, large temples to Abadar and Gozre, and the recently restored and refurbished Feast Hall of Eridan, a unique entertainment venue for citizens of all stripes. Oldtown is not quite as upper class as Admiralty Hill, but it has undeniably witnessed a degree of gentrification over recent decades. So, that is a summary of Augustana, but the Arthfell region has much more to offer besides. Other settlements, of course, include Riverford, which we sailed past during my discussion of werewolves, the humble fishing village of Alvis, infamous home to the Andoran Alchemical Society, and Clys, best known for being built atop an ancient, subterranean Aslanti fortress. But there can be no doubt that the most promising area of the Arthfell region for the budding adventurer is its forest. Do not let history deceive you. It may be a shadow of its former self, but like actual shadows, it is dark and dangerous. Within the Arthfell forest you will not find many, or any, permanent settlements, and those you do will not recognize the legitimacy of the Andoran nation. Once you cross the threshold of the tree line and venture beneath the shade of its leaves, the forest asserts its own authority. Stewarded by many Fae of the First World, the Arthfell represents a parcel of land abandoned by time, and defended by those who will not hesitate to curse any outsider who may befall their homes. Therefore, I cannot speak of specific locations within the forest, for these are ephemeral and ever-shifting, but I can speak of factions. Recall the brief period of unity brought about by the hard work of the druid Narvan Feathereyes before his untimely death in 4508. Well, some believe that his demise was engineered by the Lumber Consortium, whose agents have long worked to facilitate instability among the remaining forest dwellers. While I do not know the facts surrounding Feathereye's death, I can attest to the unbridled malice many consortium leaders have towards all Fae, and Fae lovers, as they dub anyone striving to live in harmony with them with proud derogation. I therefore do think it possible that a consortium assassination brought about Feathereye's death, and to many residents of Arthfell who share this conviction, this is unforgivable. So today, there are 4 major factions vying for control of Arthfell Forest, or 5 if you include the consortium itself, which you should, and only one of them maintains a policy of peaceful coexistence with the others. This would be the Greenfire Circle of Druids, which tries to follow Narvan Feathereye's principle of harmony as closely as possible. Led by an enigmatic figure called Tablik, the Druids have made significant progress on checking the consortium's ambitions with shrewd diplomacy, although the optics of humans, even Druids, working out deals with others in camps established to fell trees could easily be weaponized against them. Indeed, an opposing Druid circle called the Third Veil has done exactly that. Convinced that an assassination was behind Feathereye's death, Third Veil members have taken it upon themselves to abduct frontier farmsteaders and lumberjacks from the edges of the forest and crucify them on trees visible to outsiders, as a warning against any further trespass. Obviously, this has in turn given plenty of ammunition to the consortium to use against the other residents of the forest, Third Veil or not. The third faction is perhaps better described as a cult. It is called the Shadow Pack, led by a ranger called Orore Kaisera, and it consists entirely of lycanthropes who have forsworn Andoran civilization in favor of the forest life. Unfortunately, under Kaisera's leadership, the werewolves have also launched assaults on the very same civilization they purportedly desire to escape, most famously in the Night of Silver Blood in 4707, when they joined forces with hobgoblins to besiege the town of Oldtown in the Darkmoon Vale. The siege was ultimately unsuccessful, but it revealed that the Shadow Pack had successfully experimented with mutating their curse into new and even more dangerous forms under the light of the full moon, including by apparently acquiring an immunity to silver, much to the dismay of Ulfden's protectors. The final faction does not have an official name, but simply consists of those inhabitants who do not care for the outside world one way or the other. Led by a druid called the Blooded Stag, this neutral party probably represents the majority of the forest's inhabitants. After all, most who live in the Arthfell would prefer not to dwell on matters and peoples beyond its borders. While not overtly hostile to the outside world, keep in mind that the philosophy of the Blooded Stag revolves around the worship of dark fey gods and nameless powers of the forest that respond to blood sacrifices, so you are by no means safe in the presence of one of his followers. Frankly, unless you personally know of a druid loyal to the Greenfire Circle, or come prepared for a long and bitter traverse through dark woodlands, I would avoid the Arthfell forest entirely. The final point of interest in the Arthfell region can be found just east of the forest, in the narrow mountain passes that separate the Arthfell peaks from the Nogortha peaks. While you can traverse the mountains through this gap, you would be mad to do so, because it would necessitate a visit to the necropolis at its heart. You see, in ages past, when Taldor's Fourth Army of Exploration was still ravaging the landscape, the local Kelid tribes fled into the mountains. The invaders did not pursue them, but neither did they permit them to leave without battle. It was not long before starvation and famine gripped the surviving populace, and there is not much to eat in mountain passes. Consequently, one tribe turned to cannibalism. If you have been following my expositions on the Encyclopaedia Galadianensis, you should already know how this story ends. Cannibalism, especially on such a large scale, more or less guaranteed that a Wendigo would emerge. And emerge one did, slaying one victim every night until the whole tribe was deceased. The dead were buried underneath rocky outcroppings that today are called the Nogortha Necropolis, and it is whispered that many items and artifacts of value were buried with them. After all, nobody ever dared to claim them, for they were afraid of the Wendigo. Occasionally, some brave or foolish soul still ventures up into the mountains to claim the treasure for themselves, but they never return. Whether the Wendigo remains or not, I could not tell you, but I can tell you that some horror must lurk among the bones of the restless dead there, guarding the Kelid's valuables with malice. Securing that route would be a boon for Andoran, if you dared. Well, stranger, that is the first major region of Andoran covered. The remaining three are the Carpenden Plains, the Darkmoon Vale, and the Verduran Forest. Let's retire for the evening, though, seeing as this rain is showing no signs of abating. There is plenty more lore to be told within our barge. We'll continue documenting Andoran's geography on the morrow. Well, until then.